important vehicle for job creation, as well as to create employment for millions of unemployed people. And it's well known that 98% of the small and micro enterprises in our country, 98% of the firms are small and micro enterprises, and out of those, 65% are small enterprises particularly. And roughly 49% of the small and micro enterprises are operated by women. So the general objective of our study is to examine sustainability of the women-owned small and micro enterprises, that means micro enterprises in which women are engaged to some level of managerial positions. This is particularly for the hospitality and manufacturing industries. Specifically, the study will assess determinants of changes in proxy variables for sustainability, which are like human resource expansion, diversification of service provision, changes in income generation, positive change, growth in profit, as well as change in asset and capital in the identified industries. And we will also use qualitative research, qualitative approach in order to identify challenges and the gaps associated with the growth of the industry. Theoretically, we pulled various theoretical frameworks for us to frame our research question. Most of the theoretical frameworks that we have are based on the extent to which resources can be used in order for the industry to become sustainable, and some of them focuses on stakeholders and business environment in which the small and micro enterprises are involved. So, for example, the resource-based view theoretical framework by Penrose states that sustainability of the small and micro enterprises or firms depend on the resource to which they commit. Others state that sustainability and the positive change in small micro enterprise depends on the extent to which they innovate and adopt the different technologies. The other theoretical foundations that we used is by Freeman, which states that the stakeholders determine the sustainability of the small and micro enterprises. As I mentioned, we put together various theoretical frameworks in order to cover all factors that determine sustainability of the small and micro enterprises. For example, the contingency theory also states that the sustainability of small and micro enterprises depends on the structure of the organization, the size of the organization, the environment in which the organizations are working, as well as the strategies that the organization adopts. The last theoretical framework that we looked at is the upper Asians theory, which states that the sustainability of a firm depends on the situation of the manager. This includes the level of education or value, personality traits of high-level executives, such as the age of senior executives and the professional background, the working experience, and so on. So, in our empirical study, we will use all those theoretical frameworks in order to analyze the sustainability of SMEs. This is the conceptual framework. It shows how macro-level decisions like policies, governance, peace and security determine the SME's sustainability. I might not need to go through. If anybody is interested, I think we can share with you the full write-up of the paper. So the study area, for this study we have selected 5 cities, Addis Ababa, Redwa, Bahar, Juma, and Vassar. These 5 cities are selected purposely in order to represent the different categories of the country. For instance, Juma is selected to represent the western part of the country, Redwa the eastern wing of the country, and Bahar and Addis Ababa would represent the fast-growing SME areas. Sampling and sample size. The data required for this study was both primary and secondary data. Primary data was selected from federal organizations, while secondary data collected from federal organizations, while the primary data was collected through household survey, focus group discussion, and key informant interview. Particularly, the household survey, the formal survey was conducted. 600 randomly selected SMEs, out of which we get 564 responses, 94% response. Yeah. So the method of data analysis, in order to determine to identify the determinants of sustainability, we measured based on the 5 proxy variables, like service diversification, income growth, a change in human resource, and amount of capital and asset, the change in amount of capital and asset over time. So this was a continuous variable when we collected the questionnaire, but later, depending on we see the positive changes or not, we categorize it to dummy variables. And so accordingly we used binary logistic regression in order to analyze the determinants. Regarding explanatory variables, we used 2-level explanatory variables. One is individual characteristic of the managers. Second one is the group level variables, like group size and group composition.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am presenting this on behalf of the research team. Research is women's employment and work empowerment at workplace, the case of professional women employees in the banking sector in Ethiopia. My presentation will be following this outline. As a background, women's labor force participation has increased significantly over the last century, and that has been considered as one of the most significant achievements in the social and economic aspects of life of women. And those changes are referred to structural shifts in the world economy from agriculture and industry to the service sector, which is known to employ a large number of women. And because of that, women's share in the service sector has shown significant increase from about 39.5% in 1991 to 60% in 2019. That's the global data according to AAU. And retail banking is among the third sectors which is employing a large number of women. And that consistent with that, there is increasing number of women entering the sector in Ethiopia. For example, in the period between 1990 and 2011, the finance sector in the country experienced the second highest level of employment growth. That's 7.3%, and that's the highest number next to the construction sector. Rationales for the study are that one, contemporary trends in women's employment reveal mixed trends of success or progress and regress at the same time, or stagnation. There is progress not in reducing the gender gap, especially when it comes to the number of employees, but gender inequality at workplace remains an ongoing concern. And thus, much is yet to be done with regard to women's empowerment. There are further details, but existing research on women's empowerment in general emphasizes how women's employment translates into changes in the domestic domain. But the process by which women become empowered as workers are less explored. And research then on the finance sector in Ethiopia focus more on analyzing the financial and regulatory aspects instead of on the empowerment and agency aspects of women. Because of this, there are a number of outstanding issues that should be addressed by scientific studies. And this study was conducted with the following objectives. One, it aimed to assess whether there is gender occupational segregation in the banking sector. Two, to examine the major determinants or factors that affect women's participation in the sector and in different types of management. And the third objective is to examine whether women experience workplace harassment. And finally, we try to look into how professional women respond to any sort of harassment. We have reviewed literature related to the key variables of interest, and the theoretical frameworks involved in this study were drawn from three main strands: the gender organization theory, Habib's empowerment model, and the concept of respectable femininity. We have drawn from this theoretical perspectives, and the conceptual framework for assessing women's empowerment at workplace was this one. And it was drawing on concepts from the literature and the key variables of interest. At individual level factors, we have age, marital status, place, grow up, religion, education, monthly salary, and so on. There are work-related factors. There are household level characteristics, including household size, equity in division of labor at household level, family support, and the like. Then we have organizational level factors, like corporate profile, gender corporate practice, and gender institutional culture of the banks. And at the core of the framework, we have issues of empowerment, women's empowerment at workplace. With regard to the methodical aspects, the study covered 4 big cities, Addis Ababa, Adama, Hawassa, and Dhaka. Only commercial banks were considered in the study, and they were 7 of the banks, 1 public bank and 6 private banks. And those banks were the ones which were established until 2019. And with regard to individual participants, women who have a minimum of bachelor's degree and a 2 years experience in the sector were eligible for participation. Coming to the sampling strategy, we employed multi-stage sampling, and the target employees were 124 employees or officials for the bank survey, and 544 employees for the women's survey in the banks. For data collection, we have employed the mixed methods approach. Mixed methods. There were 2 sets of survey instruments and 2 sets of interview guides. 1 set for the key informant domain, and another set for management at higher level. The fieldwork was conducted in 3 phases, and we have employed enumerators, survey supervisors, and the 3 researchers were following and monitoring the entire process. For data analysis, we have employed descriptive and inferential statistics for the quantitative and thematic analysis for analyzing the qualitative data. Results. The data reveals that the number of women entering the banking sector has increased significantly from year to year. And the gender distribution of the workforce shows that less than 33% of the total employees of the banks are women. Although the figure is increasing, it is still close to a third of the employees. That's for the average. There are certain banks who have just achieved better. In fact, one of the banks has more than 50% of its employees as women. And the government bank employs more than half of the overall banking staff in the country. Only 3 of the banks, all private, have women employees consisting more than a third of the banking workforce. So women's representation in the bank's management and governance domains is still gets thinner and thinner as one goes up the ladder. So we see limited women participation in management and governance positions like the CEOs and presidents. Some of the banks have all men. On average, only 60% of members of the boards are women. In fact, there is an outlier bank in this regard which has about 55% of board members women. So our proportion of women who hold the position of top management at the time of the survey was around 7.2%. And at middle level, we observed about 13% of the management, mid-level management positions were occupied by women. About 24% of the women have ever participated in management positions, ever participated. 76% have no management experience at all. And a number of barriers were mentioned with regard to entry into the management positions. Of this, lack of adequate institutional support and women's extended family obligations were noted to be the two most important factors limiting women's participation in management positions. There are other factors with the specified degree of influence as shown in the graph over there. Then another element was whether women experience workplace harassment. And here, one important note, workplace harassment was defined very broadly. It includes verbal abuse, bullying, undermining women, preferring male workers instead of women to receive service from, and so on. So, when we refer to workplace harassment, we should not consider it to be referring to only the physical harassment and so on. Of course, it includes physical harassment and at worst, sexual harassment as well. So it's defined in broader sense. About 43% of the women who participated in the survey reported they had ever experienced general workplace harassment. Of this, 87.7% had incidents occurred during the past 12 months, and they mostly faced it more than once. Looking at perpetrators or offenders, 43% of the women reported that harassment came from customers. And in fact, a significant proportion have also reported that harassment was coming from colleagues as well. And prevalence varies by type of workplace harassment. Verbal abuse, about 40%, disrespect, 12%, exclusion or isolation, 10.3%, threats, 3%, and physical aggression, 0.7%. Again, offenders or perpetrators vary by type of harassment again. Customers and co-workers usually were identified for verbal abuse, supervisors for disrespect, exclusion, threat, and physical aggression. Okay. Response to workplace harassment. How do women respond to workplace harassment? A larger proportion of women, about 60%, chose non-confrontational response, meaning they either kept silent for different reasons or opted to handle the case in a non-confrontational manner. There are a number of reasons mentioned in the qualitative narratives, and one is that it would be a boss who gets listened if he takes the case to a senior management. Perception is that a boss will avail them anyway when they win or lose the case. There is an American proverb, your contribution is what I said. You mean widely heard the proverb, because it is a ብዙዎቻችን report analysis. Maybe never. late action or reluctance to take adequate corrective measures. These were some of the reasons. What are the significant factors that determine women's participation in management? One is individual level factors like women's education, their husband's education, and household-related factors like perceived equality in household division of labor, work-related factors like years of experience, membership in labor unions, organizational factors like office women work, specifically work in the major plants, and so on. There are specific results indicated over there. Factors associated with women's experience of workplace harassment. Again, there were individual level factors like marital status, which was associated with lower likelihood for experiencing harassment, work-related factors like increased level of responsibility, and organizational level factors like gender asymmetric practice, gender asymmetric corporate culture, proportion of women in the board and board of directors, proportion of women in labor unions, and so on. Okay. At organizational level, type of office women were working was again associated with the level of harassment. There are issues, still not commendable practice issues. Harassment remains underreported or unreported because of absence of special institutional mechanisms. In almost all of the participating banks, we didn't find special mechanisms for reporting issues of harassment. They were just and handled through the labor proclamations. But given the sensitivity of the issue, there should be special provisions or institutional mechanisms which allow women workers to report cases without being identified, meaning confidentiality is still secured. Staff and management read from different scripts regarding workplace harassment. The top level management informed us that harassment is not an issue in the banks, but 43% of the employees reported different sorts of harassment, meaning all that remains underreported or unreported. That's why we suggested the need for institutional mechanisms. The emphasis to be competitive in the financial sector tends to compromise attention for safety and progression. There are reasons, especially we didn't find daycare centers for mothers, winning mothers, where they can just attend their children around work. These issues receive good theoretical attention, but no practical action. There is a lot of banks can learn from each other. There are positive experiences, many. In conclusion, the banking sector is definitely male-dominated, and there are impediments for women progressing to senior positions. The gender gap is comparatively high, going up the ladder. Although men express a sense of fulfillment with regard to financial empowerment, the software aspect, the agency aspect of empowerment still leaves a lot to be demanded. Just a minute. Contrary to what one would expect, there is workplace harassment, and women's individual and banks' organizational response to workplace harassment are shaped by a number of factors. Yeah. This is my last slide, if you allow me. Yeah. There is need for adequate guidelines or practicum to increase competitiveness of graduating class students. The reason for this recommendation is that at entry level, all HR managers reported that women's representation at entry is low because they couldn't find competitive applicants. That could be addressed by applying strong practical sessions. There is need to go beyond the labor market, beyond affirmative action. The issue is very sensitive. Institutional mechanisms to improve work-life balance for women and allow them time space to invest in their career development are very important. And ensuring confidentiality ensuring mechanisms for reporting and following up harassment, interbank experience sharing. There are a number of branches.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Two agencies, assuming that my
investigating on poverty, food security, quality of work, and participation in leadership among female employees in Ethiopia, evidence from industrial practice. So the outline of the presentation is I will try to give you a very brief introduction about the concept, then conceptual framework, the methodology we use, key results, and then recommendations. So, as an introduction, we know that structural transformation has been considered as, a pathway to ensure sustainable development, and it is unfortunately structural transformation in Africa is less than successful, and then it is a road to travel. So this is evidenced by the fact that the share of the manufacturing sector from the total GDP is 12% in 2020, from 18% in 1981. And then if you look at the reality in Ethiopia, the figure is a bit small, even compared to sub-Saharan African countries. So the figure is 6.8%. That means the manufacturing sector contributes only 6.8% to the total GDP. So that in order to change this picture, the Ethiopian government has introduced various industrial policies, including constructing industrial parks. So industrial parks have been already created, more than 70,000 jobs, of which 85% of them are women employees. So, and then from these industrial parks, the government and textile sector takes the lion's share. So that their questions are always emerging as far as creating decent work is concerned, because it's not only generating employment, which is important, rather we question to what extent those employed persons are secure, are they free from poverty, are they free from any kind of harassment and so on. These questions are fundamental, and the researchers have been already conducted so far in the area, but they are mostly focusing on harassment and so on. They didn't look at it from food security perspective, from a poverty perspective, and from looking at creating decent work. So the main purpose of this research is to bridge this research gaps by looking at to what extent working at industrial practice enables us to lower poverty and food security, and to what extent industrial parks create decent work to its employees. And we have tried to look at normative assessment by looking at cultural behaviors and then practices. So the conceptual framework is basically we're trying to integrate demographic factors, socioeconomic and then personal factors, institutional factors, and then factor-related factors to look at the impact of these integrated variables on food security. So on the demographic factors, as we know, the age, the marital status, the dependence ratio, the experience, the work experience that employees have. And on the social economic factors, we look at the level of education, special training taken by employees, the origin from where they are they basically coming from the area where the industry park is located, or are they coming from some other area? And then we are also trying to look at some other variables, including distance from the park, homework load, and then if there is any presence of additional paid work. So on factor-related factors, as we know, provision of food support, provision of infrastructure facilities, provision of nutrition support to employees, and so on are very much fundamental to influence the expenditure pattern and the food expenditure of employees. This and then the above particularly factor-related factors are very much fundamental to explain the work function. So this eventually affects the outcome variables, which are food security and then poverty, and of course job satisfaction. This is a brief summary of our methodology, the methodology that we have adopted, but particularly the quantitative analysis. The first is the food security component. In this regard, we have applied three methodologies. The first is household food insecurity access scale function, and dietary diversity, and the last one is the coping strategy index. On the poverty side, we have we have tried to measure income poverty, and decent work. We have used a lot of dimensions, but for this presentation we have singled out job satisfaction. On the regression analysis, depending on the nature of the variables, on the EVS side, we apply contract logic, and dietary diversity as it's a common stuff, so we apply a Poisson regression. And then coping strategy exists a continuous variable, so we apply multiple linear regression. And income poverty, we classify employees as poor and non-poor, so that logistic regression have been applied. Decent work, then job satisfaction, we have hierarchical variable, so that we apply ordered logic. So the variables that we have included in our model some are particularly related to the nature of the employee, like age, marital status, urban, that means are they coming from the town or from elsewhere, family size, dependency ratio, and so on. And then when we come to the sample size, we have selected 4 industrial parties, and the criteria of selections are basically, are they, to what extent they are specializing on the production of textile and garment. That's one. Second is area. So we have on the northern side we have Kambodscha, on the south side we have Hawassa, and then on the industrial zone around Addis Ababa, and then we take Bolivia as a proxy for Addis Ababa. So, and then using Yamana formula, we have 460 sample size, and then we distribute it according to the shape and the weight. So just to give you some highlight about the socioeconomic profile of our respondents, you can see that the age of the respondents are concentrating around 22. And then indeed there is some kind of statistical significance. And at volume means the age is 23, while for others the age is 22. A level of education in grades, and then except in Hawassa, the age is, the level of education is 10 or closer to 10. And then duration of employment, you can see that the highest duration of employment is observed at Hawassa Industrial Park, followed by Bolivia. And then monthly salary, there is a very significant difference in terms of monthly salary. And then the highest rate is paid at Bolivia, and the lowest is paid at Hawassa. And frequency of working hours beyond 7 p.m. per minute. And then the highest is at Bolivia, and then followed by industrial zone. So working time, that means per week, how many hours do they work per week? So the highest is at Bolivia, and then industrial zone. So family size, there is no statistical difference of employees in terms of family size, and the family size is close to 2. So when you look at other dimensions, because they are very much fundamental to explain food insecurity and poverty. So more of looking, how do they live? that means their housing status particularly. So the mode of living, if you look at, there is a significant difference in terms of mode of living among these industrial parties. Living in Paris for relative households, in relative houses, and then in Cambodia this is quite pervasive. And even in Cambodia, living in rented house alone is also very hard when compared to other industrial parties. That's particularly related to the house rent they pay. And and living rented in the shared house, this is quite high in Hawassa, and then even in Strato. And then living in their own home, there is no anyone who is living in their own home from Hawassa, even Strato. And so these are basically the socio-economic characteristics that we observe. In terms of pension, the low share of them are working at operation. They don't have any pension. Origin, when we look at origin, so this could be a very good proxy to what extent employment is created. Is it created only for people coming from the town, or is it created for people coming from different areas? So in this regard, at Abu Dhabi, 56.8% of them are coming from out of the town, out of the region. But if you look at in Cambodia, you can see that like 41% of them are coming in town. So in terms of consumption pattern, consumption expenditure of employees, you can see that there are basically the lion's share of their expenditure goes to house rent. So for instance, at Abu Dhabi, from their monthly income, 1,134 per year is expended on house rent. And then at Hawassa, education is also the other big component, because from their total income, 336 were spent on education. This is because if you look at from the profile, their education level is quite high, so they want to extend their education. So given this, we're also trying to look at to what extent employees are participating in decision making. So, and then we ask them two questions. The first is the extent of the involvement of employees in decision making. So you can see that the figure is concentrating around very low extent and low extent in all industry zones. And the same is true for the extent to which their boss consider their opinion decision making. So their bosses, they don't consider their voices in decision making. And then when we look at the other two important dimensions for career development in training, we have asked them a few questions. The first is the extent to which they have the possibility to engage in further training in their organizations. So that almost the figure is very much similar in these questions, and it is concentrating on very low extent and then other. So that it tells you the extent to which that employees they don't have any opportunity to continue their education and then get adequate training in the industrial practice. The other two dimensions in this regard are income satisfaction and then work satisfaction. In terms of income satisfaction, to what extent are their salary adequate and are they satisfied with their salary? And are they, as such, do they really perceive that their salary explain their effort? So the respondent is responded that very low extent, and then some industrial practice. The very small figure is average. Otherwise, employees feel that their salary, they are not satisfied by their salary, and then their salary doesn't reflect the efforts they are exerting. And then in terms of work satisfaction, you can see that many of the employees are not satisfied by their work. So the other interesting finding that we have obtained is on the level of food security, which is one of our major concerns. So you can see that the level of food security have been categorized into four: food secure, mildly food secure, modestly food secure, and uncertainly food insecure. So in Cambodia, nearly half of them are food secure, while in other areas, you can see that the low share of employees are falling under different food insecurity status. So, for instance, if you take severely food insecure as a case in point, 53 or nearly half of the respondents at Hawassa are suffering from severely food insecurity. Dietary diversity score, there is no any significant difference in terms of diversity score. The maximum figure is 12. So, and then the figure is concentrating around 7. So when you look at their consumption pattern, many of their consumption is on cereals, on root crops, on vegetables, and then pulses. But if you look at the nutritious-rich foods such as eggs and then fruits and others, they don't consume. So it shows you the extent to which food insecurity is quite pervasive in industrial practice in Ethiopia. So that what kind of coping strategies do they apply to combat the problem of food insecurity? So the lion's share of them are relying on less preferred foods, followed by purchase food on credit, and even nearly 90% of them sometimes skip entirely without eating. So, like you can see, the problem, the severity of the problem. So we have also tried to run a couple of regressions, and then I have portrait for you here. The first is what are the determinants of food insecurity. So that you can see that when salary increases, the probability of households to fall into severely food insecurity increases, while the probability to be food security increases. And the other dimension is related to living in a rented house. And then, when those who are living in a rented house, the probability of being to be in severely food insecurity increases. The probability. So that there are a couple of variables that also explain the level of food insecurity, but for policy purposes, have focused on transportation, salary, and then living conditions of employees. And then in terms of satisfaction of employees, what explains their level of satisfaction? So the same as the level of food insecurity, the house issue is again turning out to be one of the fundamental, variables that explain overall satisfaction of employees. We have also tried to include some factory-specific variables, including the social support, to what extent their work is burning and so on, and then you can see that they are statistically significant. So, having said so, what are the recommendations that we can fetch from our analysis? The first one is we have to develop a strategy to increase the salary of employees. It's not only creating employment which is important. Of course, creating employment is important for a country such as Ethiopia, where we have a high rate of unemployment. But we have to also think of the kind of employment that we create should enable our employees to be food secure, and then, of course, free from poverty. And then we have to also provide training and then capacity building. When we made a focus discussion with those who own the firm, they say that the productivity of workers is extremely small. That's why they are not as such paying them high wage rate. Therefore, in order to change this stuff, we have to provide training and then capacity building in such a way that they will earn more, and then there will also be, the employees will be enhancing their career. And if you look at under scrutiny, the largest segment of the coping strategies is linked to adjusting feeding system. Therefore, there should be a mechanism as to how a provision of cheap and then affordable food to employees could be guaranteed. There are some kind of initiations actually in some industrial practice that we have observed, but that thing should be scaled so that employees at least could be food secure. The other is availing services such as housing and transportation. And then except Bodilemi House, Bodilemi Industrial Park, there is no any housing provision to operators. So when we formulate our industrial policy, we have to also include a mechanism as to how employees can get cheap and then affordable houses, so that they could spend more on food items. And then we have to design transparent work and then get basic promotion systems in the factories, Actually, I didn't present the result here, but from the notable analysis that we have, there is no any asset transparent working in the merit-based promotions in the countries. And then putting in place robust techniques and mechanisms for regulating the practices around the right and privilege of female workers. There is a lot of problems that we have observed, and we have included in our research. So that in order to combat such a problem, we should have such kind of robust techniques. And the last one is a legal response and action should be in place to combat abuses and harassments at workplace. And thank you. I wish to see such kind of smiling face for our employees.
Hi, thank you so much for those presentations. Those were really interesting. So I'll be quick. So I'm Dr. Kisla Kehi. I'm from Vassar College, and I just had questions for the last three presenters, actually. So for Dr. Asifa, I was really wondering, with the data you were presenting, you presented this really interesting statistic that 98% of the enterprises in Ethiopia are small and micro, but there was no real kind of conversation about informality on these firms, and I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about how formality status matters and how it might differ by gender as well. I think that would be interesting. And then for Dr. Matibu, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I really had this interesting question where, if I'm understanding correctly, so the sampling frame, everybody you talked to was currently working at a bank, right? So they're current employees of a bank. But then you had this interesting comment that what's holding women back from being promoted to management is having a family, right? And so I'm just wondering that given that these women are already working, how does having a family hold them back from management? Like, what is the mechanism at play there for what's actually holding them back, given that they're already working? So these women are already in the labor force, right? So what's holding them back? And then for Dr. Solomon, the question I had, this is really interesting work. I was wondering a little bit about when you collected this data, and in particular, I was thinking about demand for garments and textiles and how it's just kind of changed quite a bit over the last few years. And if you could speak to how the women, how their salaries are calculated. So what really popped out in a lot of the regressions that you were showing is that salary is obviously very correlated, right, with food security. But I'm wondering if how their salaries are calculated is directly related to demand for goods, right? Are they able to work overtime? What could adjust their salary? I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Thank you.
This afternoon. For sure, I think this is a disservice to have all of them at once, because then some of the ideas do escape as the others are presenting. So I hope next time we can have 2 days even of this meeting. Mm-hmm. So now the first one to Dr. Fikadi, is it? And he had talked about, because on women empowerment in Ethiopia. Because based on the fact that, as you correctly put it, that empowerment is also multidimensional from the different components you put together. Did your review show in any way which kind of those domains actually contribute to the empowerment more, or the disempowerment of the women within those sectors we looked out for? Because at the end of the day, one should be a bit more than the other. Is it the economic bit of it? Is it the choice bit of it? So what did the literature talk about in terms of what's driving this empowerment more, or the disempowerment beyond the so what's contributing to these choices more? Then to Dr. Asefo, in terms of determinants of sustainability. So this, I told myself, I think the whole analysis was a bit general in terms of the end of it all. What was the scope in manufacturing? Because even manufacturing is big. So what is in manufacturing did you look at? What in the hospitality sector did you look at? Because these are big scopes of industries. So what element did you look out for in that, since I saw that the analysis was more general? And such that even the the determinants would be more at which industry. The determinants for manufacturing, for those sectors you told us, for those segments within manufacturing, and then those that are driving hospitality. So what was driving this kind of mix? And lastly, to Dr. Solomon, when I looked at this topic, poverty and food security, I thought it's so big. In itself, it is not easy to manage all this quality of work, food security. So, and then I looked at myself in terms of one element. In terms of food security, it's driven by seasons. Seasonality has to be factored in. Did we factor in the element of seasonality when you're capturing the food security? Because there are times when situations when people are more food secure and then when they are also less food secure. I submit. This is Martina Ulova from Uganda.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mine is not a question. I have 2 points, 2 suggestions, technically not questions. The first one relates to the first 3 presenters, mostly. It's about when we talk about women empowerment. There is this very big concept which I think Dr. Nafkado alluded to at the beginning of his presentation, but did not really jump much on it, is the whole issue of care work. When we talk about women empowerment, we are focusing on something that we think women do not have at the moment. But there is something that they already have, but we don't recognize, which is a care work. A work that is unpaid for, but women are critically and substantially engaged. If you ask a husband who is not formally employed in any of the organizations, what does she want? And he will tell you she doesn't have anyone. That's the answer. But that woman, the work that she does at home, what we call the care work, if it is evaluated in terms of monetary terms, it is in some respects, there are some studies that indicate the value of that work is even more higher than the value of the employment generated income that the husband gets.
Independent findings regarding the women and the empowerment of women. I am from the standing committee, which is related to women in social affairs. So we are doing check and balance with the Ministry of Women in Social Affairs. We do evaluation of plans. We evaluate plans and reports. We evaluate reports. But there is a big difference between the report that we usually listen to and the finding that you have provided us today. Today there is a big problem regarding to women empowerment. We have seen women do have poor access to different things, to resources, to land, to technology, workplace, market linkage. There is no good market linkage between producers, women producers, and consumers. So we should work hard on this one. We should strengthen. Of course, we are doing our best in proclamation about ratification in other laws. We do check and balance. We do public representation in our constituency. Even the Ministry of Women in Social Affairs are also doing their best. However, the result indicates that we should do a lot. We lag behind. We lag behind in many aspects. You have provided us the food insecurity. 19.4% of women in the industrial partners do not eat the whole day. That is very headache. There are also other findings which, like Ethiopia is losing $3.7 billion per year because of gender inequality. I think I have heard that kind of. Even Ethiopia is one of the 10 least developed countries. And it is related to gender inequality here. So you have provided us really with good, latest, reliable, independent findings. Please work with the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs closely. Please work with our parliament. There is a session when laws are ratified. There are sessions, stakeholder sessions.
So Ethiopian Economics Association is one of the stakeholders in many fields. So please participate in the sessions and provide your findings so that we can get Ethiopia out of these problems. And you can tell us also things that we may work together in the future that can help our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. On the ground, like maybe women, some presenters pointed out that there are lack of even caretaker situations in offices, organizations, which need instruments which can, I think, source down the difficulties that women face. So we can oversight such kind of issues, and we can again ask support from other committee members, standing committee members, which are doing the same activities. And the one thing is again encouraging good things which are taking place in our country. And the best point we can learn is women are strong when they gain place and when they are given the opportunity. As it indicated that some women who are managers of some enterprises are profitable than others, may dominate the world. So we can work together, and coming together is the best way to tackle the problems we face. So thank you very much. Thank you.
There are economic, social, dimensions of it. So I think we have to work a lot. This year, my remark is that economic association, my association. After saying this actually, of course, 10 papers in one workload. I think some other time we will have relaxed because whenever we present such type of paper, we have a mix of people. And those we consider or focus on the purely academic presentation, because if you invite this policy making studies, you have to narrate and prepare for the politicians or for the policy makers, very summarize concerns like that. Because that's the message, the final message is, we have a lot of studies in shelters, but we are not down to the ground, We are not exercising, we are not practicing. That's because of the limitation that's political government or responsible organizations that implement such papers or such studies. So to negotiate with government, at least we have narrated, focus, action plan. Actually, we have a lot of policy briefs from the association having that one objective, and we have to work on that side. But for the study makers, whenever we present papers, okay, that's good. Technically, we have for academic exercise, but we have to summarize it, provide a message, key message that has to be grasped by politicians or government officials. When you see the total 10 papers actually, for some have policies, what's the problem implementation-wise? For some, we don't have any policy and strategy, so we have to work at risk towards that. And for others, actually, we have policies, but we have to work. So we have to work on that way. In general, I provide advice. Ethiopian Association. You have to strongly, you have to narrate problems and negotiate with the government, federal government, and regional government for pure implementation. Now this gender, because this is sensitive issue. We have $3.7 billion actually. Less or more, but we expect more. To address this problem and to come to the growth for this at least we have to communicate with federal regional government. If we do that, actually, we can have a positive result, a positive effect. Otherwise, lots of people because our time so we have to make and bring into action the other thing actually, the second one, which I will advise is, there are sector specific steps like commercial bank of Ethiopia. That's
employment rate of women is only 30%, and I hope one of the private banks could be in that bank, because I have seen exceptional results from the study. So I have a suggestion for this house from the government and from private sectors to have an assignment to your offices, because as a bank we can do it, to take a step and incorporate the employment rate of women in our organization to more than 50%. That was 60% even in the last 10 years. We are trying to maintain it, and the board of directors 55% is also an advantage, and the executive level we could maintain 50%. So we can do it. We can do it, but we need to take a step. That it doesn't make any improvement or enhancement regarding the employment or inclusion of women by only taking or talking about the last generation's legacy. That is what we are talking about. Women or the gap, the gender gap is what we have got from the last generation. So that is a legacy. So we are now to improve it. So we have to take all the assignments to our office and start to revising our strategies and policies regarding gender inclusion. Because in that one, since its establishment 10 years back, we have gender responsive strategy and policies. And we have the only in the finance sector that there is a women banking solution department that is accountable for the bank CEO, the president, and represented by gender focal desks in all our more than 130 branches. So another bank is doing, and all you in this house can do it. Thank you.
And comments related to the recommendation specifically. In our document, what we did is the recommendations are very specific. And we have 3 stakeholders that we have included. The first is the government, the second is the parties themselves, and the third one is the employees themselves as stakeholders. So that the recommendations have been arranged in that way. When we come to the first question is, how does the employees is calculated? There is basic salary that they pay, and then there is also a piece rate. So we have classified the salary into 2 components. The first is the basic salary. The second is the incentive they take into their pay. So we added these 2, and then we call it as income of employees. That's one point. That's the question is related to seasonality. As for security is related to the seasons when we call it the daytime. But seasonality is very much important for rural areas, because in rural area households have acute time when they don't have adequate stock of food, particularly during June, July, and August in Ethiopian context. But these are employees, so then production and then consumption decisions are separable in this case. And apart from that, we have used 2 instruments. The first is on dietary diversity, and second is the EPS one. The EPS one asks employees on 1 month range, and that way we try to manage the seasonality. Yeah, so these are the questions related to me.
Thank you very much. Comments,
Mr. Chairperson, I joined Dr. Asafa in appreciating your excellencies for joining us, and of course, Ethiopian Economics Association has done a commendable job bringing in important target audience. This is how policy and research can be complementing each other. Coming to the questions, we consider all the comments given by the different participants. Just I will be speaking on 2 points. The 33% achievement is in fact quite commendable. But given that we have more than 50% of the population, women constitute more than 50% of the population, there is still a lot we need to do. And we have practical examples which are achieved by some of the banks, the private banks. Fortunately, Wazir Tananya from Bank was here, and she has been indicating that information. She even identified that the information, the data relates to her bank. And if there is a commitment and good strategies, we can even achieve more. And women deserve more. That's the message. Otherwise, we are not trying to levy any blame on any of the banks. They have performed well, they have done very well. Compared to many other sectors, they have achieved more than a third of the employees are women, and that's quite commendable. The interest with the management staff to increase the proportion of women is also very promising. But there is one practical limitation which requires the involvement of different stakeholders, especially the universities. At entry level, graduates were found to be less competitive to win the job positions. And that capacity gap should be addressed through a joint venture. There should be practical engagement in the form of creating practical opportunities for graduating class students so that they have good exposure of skills and experience that the banks require. That will improve the intake, their number at entry level. That's what. Of course, even at a management level, the banks are trying their best to increase the proportion of women. But again, there are issues that require important attention from the regulatory agencies, the National Bank of Ethiopia. There should be some supportive directives which target women empowerment in those sectors. Otherwise, we are not levying any blame on any of the banks. They are doing great, and they have the interest and commitment to improve that aspect. And NatBank has demonstrated the possibility of doing and achieving more. That's the message.